The night my own family called me a liar, my phone rang, and I put the bank on speaker. In that living room, surrounded by my parents and my brother, I found out who had really been draining my life savings. And it wasn't a stranger. It was the person they trusted most. They told me to just let it go, to protect him, to stay quiet. But when the evidence showed up with his name on it, I had to decide. Do I save my brother? Or finally save myself? Stay with me till the end of this video, because the way I walked out of that house changed my life, and it might change the way you see your own family too. My name is Rachel. I'm 31 years old. And before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The living room was too quiet for what had just been said. It was the kind of silence that doesn't wait for peace. It just waits for someone to give up. My brother stood near the doorway, arms folded like he'd already won. One shoulder leaned into the frame, casual, like this was already handled. My parents sat stiffly on the couch, side by side like stone statues. Mom stared straight ahead. Dad's eyes were fixed on the carpet. All three of them looked at me like I was the problem. Daniel, they know I'm right. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The confidence in his tone did the work for him. My mom nodded without turning her head. Dad didn't even look at me when he said it. Dad, just apologize, Rachel. Let it go. The words sounded automatic, like a reflex. I didn't move. Not at first. There was a dull pressure in my chest, like being underwater too long. My tongue felt thick, my hands cold. I stared at them, the three people I used to think would never doubt me, the faces that had been my whole world growing up. And now I was being treated like the liar. The folder on the coffee table was still open. Papers were spread out, edges bent from how tightly I had gripped them earlier. Bank statements, screenshots, dates that didn't line up with my brother's story. My name in bold at the top of every page. I thought, stupidly, that if I showed them everything clearly, they'd see. But I was wrong. Mom, he said he didn't touch your account. That's good enough for me. Her voice had that tired edge, like I was exhausting her. Not the missing money, not the forged withdrawal slips, not the fact that someone had crawled into my life through numbers and passwords. Just me. I had worked 3 jobs through college, saved tips, paychecks, refunds, anything extra. I saved every dime like it was sacred. That savings account was the one thing that made me feel safe, like I had something no one could take. Until Daniel did. At first, it was little things. 200 here, 500 there. Just enough to feel wrong. I noticed it one Sunday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with black coffee and an overdraft. Alert I knew wasn't right. Light came in through the window, catching the edge of my laptop screen. The withdrawals were local, same town, same branch, but I hadn't touched that account in weeks. I scrolled through the transactions again and again, trying to find the moment that would make it make sense. There wasn't one. So I asked him, me, did you use my routing number for something? We were in my parents' kitchen when I said it. Mom at the sink, Daniel leaning against the counter, phone in his hand. He didn't flinch. Daniel. What? No. Why would I? Too quick, too smooth. His eyes flashed irritation for half a second before he smiled, but something in his voice was too flat. Like he'd rehearsed it. Like this answer had been sitting on his tongue for days. I didn't say anything then. I started collecting. Calling the bank. Being put on hold. Pulling records. Putting together timelines. Circling dates. Adding notes in the margins until the pattern was impossible to ignore. I wanted to be sure before I said anything to our parents. See, my brother has always had this charm. That easy confidence people mistake for truth. He has a way of making a room lean toward him. And my parents? They were addicted to it. Daniel could crash a car and they'd ask if the light was yellow. Me? I was the sensitive one, the overthinker, the drama queen. So when I finally brought it up, when I showed up at their place with receipts, documents, and a shaking hand, they didn't even ask him to explain. They watched me instead, like I was a problem they were trying to manage. Mom, he's your brother. Stop making this ugly. Ugly. As if I was the one who emptied my own account. Daniel, you probably just forgot you used it. You've always been bad with money. He said that with a little laugh, like it was also ridiculous. Like I was ridiculous. And my dad? He rubbed his eyes and told me to stop causing trouble. Like I was a kid again, tattling, making noise. I remember staring at the carpet. Tan. Slightly frayed near the fireplace. There was a small red thread sticking out and I wanted to pull it, just to feel something give. Just to feel like I still had control over something tiny and harmless. I didn't cry. Not then. But I felt something close to grief. A quiet breaking somewhere low in my chest. They were choosing him. Not because of proof, not because of logic, but because he was familiar, predictable, easier. I had always been the storm. He had always been their son. So I stood there alone in a room full of my own family, their living room, their rules. And then my phone rang. I didn't answer right away. Let it buzz once, twice. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet room. Daniel smirked. Daniel. Probably another scam call. You really should get a new number. I looked down. Blocked number. But I knew who it was. I had been waiting for this call. Me. Put it on. Speaker. He laughed again. Daniel. Why? You expecting someone important? I pressed the green button anyway. Held it out. Me. You'll want to hear this. The voice was calm. Measured. Caller. Hello. This is Linda Bauer from First National's Fraud Investigation Team. Is this Rachel? Her words came through clear, a little echo of the call center behind her. Me. Yes. And you're on speaker. There was a pause, the kind that reshapes a room. I could hear my own breathing and the faint tick of the clock above the television. Linda. Thank you. I'm calling regarding case number 491873. B. We've completed the trace on the disputed activity and wanted to confirm that Daniel Walker, listed as the co-signer, was not authorized on the account. The silence was surgical. Me. Correct. I never added him. He wasn't supposed to have access. My mother shifted. Hands clenched. My father blinked twice like something caught in his throat. Linda. Understood. We've confirmed that the transfer requests originated from IP addresses associated with Daniel's residence. Also, the in-person withdrawals were signed using identification under his name, though forged under the account holders. Daniel's face. It didn't crack. It collapsed. The color drained from his cheeks. He tried to speak. His mouth opened, then closed. But Linda kept going. Linda. At this point, the case will be escalated for potential legal action unless resolved privately. I'll be emailing documentation to you this evening. If you have any additional questions, you may reach out directly. Click. Silence again. But not the same kind. Not the kind that wanted me to surrender. This was the kind that crawled under skin and stayed there. Daniel looked at my dad, then at my mom. For the first time, I saw confusion in their eyes instead of certainty. No one said a word. I didn't gloat. Didn't smile. There was no victory dance in me, just a steadiness I hadn't felt all night. I just picked up my folder, tucked the papers back inside. My keys were already in my hand, and I walked out. They didn't follow. Not this time. The evening air outside was cool against my face. It smelled like cut grass and distant car exhaust. For the first time that day, my shoulders dropped a little, and I didn't look back. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I didn't go home right away after that night. I sat in my car with the engine off, parked under a flickering streetlight, watching my breath fog the windshield. Late fall in Ohio has this kind of quiet cold that doesn't freeze you. It just sits on your skin and waits. My hands rested on the steering wheel. The house behind me glowed with warm windows and a life I suddenly felt outside of. Inside my chest, something had snapped out of place and was slowly settling into a new position. The dashboard clock glowed 10:47 p.m. The street was almost empty. A dog barked somewhere far off, then nothing. In that silence, I could almost hear my family rewriting what had just happened, practicing a story where I was the unreasonable one. My phone buzzed. Mom, then Dad, then Daniel. Their names stacked on the lock screen like a little family totem pole. I watched the light pulse. Once, twice, again. Then I flipped the phone face down on the passenger seat. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't scrambling to soften my words. I wasn't rehearsing the version of myself they were most willing to accept. I just sat there, breathing, letting the silence belong to me. Growing up, Daniel and I were two very different kids in the same small house. Same parents, same dinner table, same holiday photos lined up on the mantel. He was loud and easy. He made friends at the grocery store. Teachers loved him. Coaches loved him. My parents loved telling stories about him. I was quieter, the girl who stayed after class to ask questions, the one doing homework at the kitchen table while everyone else watched TV, the one who needed permission slips signed and always brought them back on time. My parents turned our difference into a running joke. Mom, Rachel's the responsible one, Daniel's the free spirit. Everyone laughed. But under the laughter were the real rules. If Daniel messed up, it was a phase. If I messed up, it was a disappointment. When we were teenagers, I kept my babysitting money in an old cookie tin in my closet. I can still remember the sound of those bills when I shuffled them. Soft. Earned. One afternoon, I opened the tin and instantly knew the amount was wrong. You don't forget your own numbers when you've counted them that many times. When I told my parents, Dad shrugged. Dad, boys will be boys. I'm sure he just forgot to tell you he borrowed it. Borrowed. Like we'd agreed on something together. We hadn't. When I started hiding money after that, sliding envelopes behind textbooks and under sweaters, Mom looked at me like I'd grown sharp edges. Mom, you're being dramatic, Rachel. He's your brother. You have to trust him. That pattern never really changed. It just learned how to dress itself in adult clothes. After college, I moved into a small apartment outside Columbus. Thin walls, old carpet, a kitchen that hummed at night, and a bathroom faucet that dripped on bad days. But it was mine. My name on the lease. My boxes stacked in the corner. I worked full-time at a logistics company, processing shipments and invoices, spreadsheets, tracking numbers. People who needed answers and needed them yesterday. Not a dream job, maybe, but steady, predictable. I opened my savings account at the bank near the office, the same bank Daniel used. At the time, it just felt convenient. I watched that account grow slow and stubborn. Paychecks, tax returns, tiny bonuses, money scraped from saying no to nights out I couldn't afford. That balance meant security to me, not luxury. Just the power to leave if I ever needed to. Proof that I could rely on myself even when no one else took me seriously. One evening, Daniel came over with a wrinkled credit card statement in his hand. He paced my living room while I cleared laundry off the couch. Daniel, they're going to send it to collections, Rach. I just need some help getting ahead of it. I didn't give him cash. I didn't hand over my card. But I did help him call the bank. We sat shoulder to shoulder on the couch, my laptop open on the coffee table. While we waited on hold, I logged into my own account to check a balance. The automated system asked for security questions, and I answered them out loud without thinking. Mother's maiden name. First school. City of birth. He watched the screen. I saw his eyes move over the numbers and prompts. He was my brother. So I told myself it was harmless. Sitting in my car now, replaying that evening, I could finally see it clearly. The way he'd gone quiet. The way his attention had sharpened. Back then I'd called it stress. Now I knew it was calculation. When the fraud investigator called me in my parents' living room, she had sounded calm, almost bland. No outrage, no drama, just details. Facts don't care about how long you've known someone. They don't care who you share a last name with. Now, alone under that streetlight, I heard her words again in my head. IP addresses linked to his apartment. In-person withdrawals using his ID. Escalation. Legal action. Each phrase pushed me one step further away from the story where this was all a misunderstanding. Eventually, I turned the key and drove home. The streets were mostly empty. Streetlights washed the road in brief pools of yellow. For a moment, I felt like I was watching my own life through glass. When I stepped into my apartment, everything was exactly where I had left it. Laundry still on the chair, mug still in the sink, mail still on the counter. Nothing had moved, except me. This space was small and imperfect, but no one had stolen it from me. No one had forged a signature for it. I plugged my phone in on the kitchen counter and left it there, face down. Lighting up occasionally with calls I chose not to answer. I stood under the shower until the water cooled. Let it thud against the back of my neck. Let their voices fade under the sound. The next morning, pale light slipped through the blinds when I woke up. I made coffee by muscle memory, sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop. At the top of my inbox sat an email from the bank. Subject: fraud case documentation. My stomach clenched as I clicked. Inside were attachments and logs, pages of dates, times, branch locations, account numbers. The pattern was obvious. Transfers on days I knew I hadn't touched the account. Withdrawals at branches near Daniel's place. Logins from devices I'd never owned. Everything my instincts had been whispering was there in black and white. Daniel had lied. Not once. Not in a moment of panic. Over and over. And my parents had helped him the way they always did, by refusing to see what didn't fit the image they had of their son. I forwarded the email to them. No extra text. No commentary. I was done trying to sell the truth to people who had already decided it was too expensive. Mom called within the hour. Mom. Rachel. Why would you involve the bank like this? Her voice shook on the edges, but not with apology, with fear. I leaned back against the counter, fingers circling the chipped handle of my mug. Me. I didn't involve them. Daniel did, when he took my money. There was a pause, then the sigh I knew too well. Mom. This could ruin his life. There it was. His life, his future, his comfort. Me. It already ruined something. Just not what you're worried about. I kept my tone even. No yelling, no begging. On the other end, she went quiet. I pictured her at the dining table twisting her ring, trying to reshape the conversation into something that hurt less without requiring change. Dad didn't call. He texted instead. Dad. He says there must be some mistake. The family script in 5 words. My thumbs hovered for a second. Then I wrote exactly what I meant. Me. The mistake was trusting him. No emoji, no follow-up. It was the first real boundary I'd ever set with them. Over the next few days, the air between us shifted. Daniel didn't call, didn't drop by, Didn't send random memes or pretend everything was normal. When he finally did message, the first line told me everything I needed to know. Daniel, you didn't have to go nuclear. Not, I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just you went too far. I let out a small, humorless laugh when I read it. Me. You didn't have to steal from me. I watched the typing dots appear, disappear, appear again. More messages followed. He was stressed. He meant to pay it back. He thought family handled things privately. Family doesn't do this. I didn't respond. Because here's the quiet truth people don't like to admit. Family can take advantage of you faster than anyone. They know exactly which guilt strings to pull. I decided mine were officially cut. The following week, I met with a legal aid counselor. Her office was small and plain, squeezed between a tax place and a nail salon. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A single plant wilted near the window. She scrolled through my emails, studied the statements, asked simple, direct questions. Counselor, you have a solid case, especially with this documentation from the bank. Something unknotted in my chest. It wasn't joy, just relief. Proof that I wasn't imagining things, that what happened to me counted. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't the villain in some family drama. I was a person who had been stolen from, and I was finally acting like it. That night, my parents texted asking me to come over. Said we needed to talk. No paragraphs this time. Just a time. And my name. I agreed. Not because I was chasing their approval anymore, but because I wanted a clear ending to this chapter on my terms. When I walked back into that same living room, it felt smaller, like the air had thickened since the last time. Daniel wasn't standing by the doorway now. He was sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. Quiet. Mom held a mug between both hands. Dad looked up at me when I entered. They finally looked unsure. And for the first time, so did my brother. The house smelled like turkey soup and old carpet cleaner. Thanksgiving had just passed, but the warmth of it never really landed here this year. Leftovers sat heavy in the fridge, stacked in plastic containers, untouched. No one had been hungry since the truth settled in. I stood in the doorway of the living room for a moment before stepping in. Same couch, cushions sagging in the middle. Same lamp with the crooked shade, casting its usual uneven glow. Same family, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The air in the room seemed thicker, like it had weight. Like every breath had to push through everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. Daniel sat at the far end of the couch, shoulders rounded, elbows on his knees, staring at his hands. He looked smaller somehow, not humbled, just exposed, like someone had yanked the curtain back, and he hadn't prepared for the light. Mom sat closer to the middle cushion, knees turned toward him. Her lips were pressed tight. Her eyes were red in the way that comes from quiet crying, not loud sobbing. Dad sat at the other end, hands clasped, his posture careful, controlled. Mom gestured for me to sit. Her fingers trembled just a little. Mom, we've been talking. Her voice was careful now, like every word might break something that couldn't be fixed. I stayed standing, feet planted on the faded rug that had been there since I was 12. Me. I know. Because of course they had been talking. They had probably replayed every moment, every sentence, trying to find a version of this where it all went back to normal. Their normal. Dad cleared his throat. He finally looked directly at me, and for the first time in years there was no certainty in his eyes. No quiet assumption that he was right and I was overreacting. Dad, the bank sent us copies too. His voice was lower than usual, flattened. I nodded once. No surprise. No drama. Me. Good. The word felt solid in my mouth. Simple. Final. Silence stretched out between us, long and thin. The clock over the TV clicked too loudly. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound seemed to carve another line between who we had been and who we were now. The heater kicked on, in the hallway, blowing lukewarm air that didn't reach where I stood. I folded my arms, not out of defensiveness, but to keep myself from shaking. Daniel shifted, rubbing his palms on his jeans like he needed friction, like he needed proof he was still here. Daniel. I didn't think it would go this far. His voice sounded strange, not as smooth as usual, a little frayed. I looked at him then. Really looked. Not as my brother who always landed on his feet, not as the golden child who could do no wrong. Just as a man who had taken what wasn't his and was now surprised to be standing in the debris. Me. You didn't think I'd fight back. I didn't raise my voice, didn't spit the words. I just handed them to him flat and honest. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, to spin it, to twist the story in his favor like he always did. Then he closed it again. No words came out. Mom's eyes were wet. Her gaze flicked between us, like she was watching a version of her family she didn't recognize. Her tears weren't for me, they were for the version of her son she was losing, the one she'd been defending since he first learned how to lie with a smile. Mom, Rachel, we didn't know. You have to believe that. She sounded desperate and fragile and so small. I felt the old instinct rise up in me, the urge to step in and comfort her, to say it's okay, to make it easier because that was always my role, the emotional buffer, the explainer, the fixer. I didn't. Me. You didn't want to know. The words landed in the middle of the room like something heavy dropped on glass. Her breath caught. Her hand tightened around the edge of the couch cushion. Because that was the truth. It had never been about not knowing. It had been about not wanting to look too closely at the person they'd decided he was. Dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His forehead creased, eyes locked on mine. Dad, what do you want to do? That question hit harder than any accusation ever had. What do you want to do? For years, what I wanted lived in the shadow of what everyone else needed. What they wanted. What made things easier, quieter. When we were kids, what I wanted didn't matter if it clashed with Daniel's fun. In college, what I wanted didn't matter if it made my parents uncomfortable. As an adult, what I wanted got buried under family expectations and the fear of being called ungrateful. But now the question was sitting in front of me, and no one was reaching to answer it for me. What did I want? For a long time, I had wanted them to choose me, to stand up for me, to say, Rachel, we believe you, to defend me the way they defended him. But that version of wanting had died quietly somewhere along the way. Piece by piece, comment by comment, dismissal by dismissal. What I wanted now was simpler, harder, cleaner. Me. I'm not asking for apologies. The words surprised even me as they came out. Realized I meant them. Daniel's head snapped up. Daniel, you're not? His eyebrows pulled together, confusion clear on his face. He'd always treated apologies like get-out-of-jail-free cards. Say the right string of words and you're absolved. I shook my head slowly. Me. I'm asking for accountability. The room felt even smaller when I said it. Like the walls were listening. I reached into my bag and placed the folder on the coffee table. Not dramatically. No slamming. Just a deliberate movement. Paper against wood. That folder had been my lifeline and my burden. Proof of what happened. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Me. The bank is moving forward unless I tell them not to. That's my decision. Not yours. This time, I didn't look at my parents when I said it. I looked at him. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Mom. Rachel, please. Her voice cracked in the middle. I could hear every fear in it. Courtrooms, charges, people whispering, holiday dinners that would never look the same again. For a heartbeat, the old guilt tugged at me. The child inside me reached for the old script. Make it easier for them. Take the blame. Take the hit. Then I remembered standing in this same room not that long ago, holding proof, being told to apologize to the person who stole from me, and that memory shut the door on the guilt. Me. I didn't ruin him, I just stopped protecting him from consequences. I watched the words hit her, hit him, hit my dad. Daniel stood up abruptly, the couch springs creaking under the sudden shift. He took a half step toward me, anger and fear warring on his face. Daniel. So what? You're just going to destroy me? His voice cracked at the end. Not from remorse, from panic. I kept my feet planted. My hands relaxed at my sides. Me. No. You did that. I'm just not lying about it anymore. His jaw clenched. His eyes were bright, but not with tears he was ready to own. Just with the shock of being seen without a filter. The room went still. Even the clock seemed quieter for a second. Dad exhaled slowly like air leaking from a tire, like the weight of all the years of defending him had finally torn something open. Dad. Son. You need to take responsibility for this. The word son sounded different this time, not protective, not indulgent. Heavy. Daniel stared at him, shock written all over his face. For the first time, someone wasn't cushioning his landing. That was the moment it broke. Not when the money disappeared from my account. Not when the bank investigator called and read out the evidence. But right here, in this quiet, cluttered living room. When the automatic protection finally stopped. When my father looked at him the way he had always looked at me. Expecting more. Daniel sat back down, slower this time. His shoulders sagged. He pressed his palms over his face, elbows on his knees. Mom reached for him on instinct, hand lifting halfway, from her lap, fingers stretching toward his shoulder. Then she hesitated. Her hand hovered in midair for a second, trembling, before she pulled it back and folded it into the other in her lap. Watching that tiny movement, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph, not joy, closure. Not the dramatic, sweeping kind you see in movies. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you finally admit to yourself that some people will never be who you needed them to be, and you stop trying to bargain with that fact. I picked up my bag. The zipper clinked softly against the metal ring. Me. I'm done explaining myself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't wait for approval. I just said it. Mom whispered my name like a prayer. Mom. Rachel. I didn't turn. I walked down the hallway I'd run through as a kid. Past the family photos, the school portraits, the Christmas pictures where Daniel was always in the center, pulling focus with a big grin, and I was slightly off to the side. I paused at the front door for half a second. Not to reconsider, just to feel the weight of the choice I was making. As I stepped outside, the air hit me. Cool, crisp, clean in a way the living room hadn't been. The sky was a flat gray, the kind that comes before snow, but doesn't quite commit. The neighborhood was quiet. A car drove by slowly, tires whispering against the pavement. I walked to my car with steady steps. Each one felt like a small declaration. Not because I won. There was no scoreboard here, no finish line tape. But because I didn't need to win anymore. I just needed to stop losing myself. I unlocked the car. Got in, closed the door. For a moment, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, forehead resting lightly against the leather. Some betrayals don't leave bruises, just silence. No visible marks, no dramatic scenes people can point to. Just tiny cuts to your trust over and over until one day you finally look down and realize you're bleeding. And sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is walk away without apologizing. I started the engine, pulled away from the house I grew up in. Not running, not fleeing, just leaving. For the first time, my future felt like it belonged to me. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.